just saw the flash. I'm ready for it. This would be connected D2.
All right, we got the final round. We have Glen the Machine Gausewitz, Cambridge's finest.
Cambridge, New York.
Cambridge, New York's finest, playing Alomgir Monsur. We got a Nimzo Indian going on here.
You click the triangle. And then click on it.
He's on board too. That's board low.
They were just moving so fast they weren't taking the time off the clock.
Glen has an expansive opening book, and if he tells you something about the opening,
You believe it.
guaranteed to be true. It's the Bible if he says it. Moves are coming quick early. There's no thinking yet. We're just reciting opening lines. Seems like Alomgir is starting to spend a little bit of time. The first deep think of the game. Main moves here for white are knight f3 or pawn to e3. Knight f3 is by far the most common. And we are following the main line of the Spielman variation of the Nimzo Indian defense. There's a few different ideas black can take here. Glen goes with queen e7. This would be a big upset if Alomgir can win the game. At 1574 winning the open section, he'd gain a lot of points. A3, asking Glen what he's going to do with that bishop. Trades with the knight. Then I assume we'll see queen captures here. We get B captures on c3. Another pawn towards the center of the board. The queen stays active on the b file. There is that isolated a pawn though. Glen castles. You get bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the queen, and then h6, asking that bishop what it wants to do. I imagine it'll stay on the board and back up to h4, keep that pin. And bishop back to f4. Certainly playable as well. Good diagonal for the bishop. I'm with Alomgir's daughter, Nirvana. Nirvana, what are you thinking about your dad's chances here?
I don't know. We'll see.
Shout out to NightOwlChess for coming to the Bennington Winter Open. We appreciate the press and anyone doing things to grow the game of chess. We get d6 from Glen, maybe trying to weaken that bishop a little bit.
So next time we need to get a full-time commentator to expand the clips.
Yeah.
That's too much.
Make it, yeah, you can make it a teaching thing, maybe get somebody up next. Yeah.
Might see that black bishop fianchettoed. That b7 to h1 diagonal looks pretty good right now. I don't know if there's any lines of bishop to a6 even with that c pawn, maybe pinning it to the f1 bishop. Maybe knight e4. Solid outpost square puts a little bit of pressure on that c3 pawn. Yep, and Glen does go with that b6 idea. That light square bishop's got to go somewhere, like Andrew said.
I would play bishop d3 here.
Andrew likes bishop to d3. You probably don't want g3 to fianchetto with that dark square bishop on f4. That makes that move impossible. e2 feels a little safer to me than d3. d3 feels a little bit more active.
You got both bishops bearing down on the king's side.
Yeah.
But bishop at f4, it's like a London system.
What do you get if your dad wins?
He goes with bishop e2.
You get it?
Yeah.
Probably dinner, take it out to dinner. You got sisters and brothers?
I have a little sister.
Ooh, so Glenn does go with that bishop to a6 idea I mentioned.
Interesting.
Just trying to target the c4 pawn. Queen to a4 seems to force bishop back to b7. Black does play queen a4. I feel like that was almost essential to play. I don't think you could let Glenn play d5 to try to break open the diagonal. Queen a4 is active enough. Ooh, minus lost bishop back to b7, but there's knight a5. The knight's very safe on this square. He is like playing principally to go after the double pawns he created. Very machine-like style.
So you said there's no free for it.
Threw it 40 to Ira.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I paid out Ira's. White castles. Can black grab that pawn right now? No, they can't. The queen and bishop both have it. I don't know if Glenn will find it, but knight to d5 is a move here. The c pawn's currently pinned to the light square bishop on e2. Knight d5 is a fairly tough move to find, but it hits the bishop on f4, it hits the undefended pawn on c3, forking the queen and the bishop. Really tough line to see. Queen d7, queen takes on d7, knight takes on d7. Very even game now. I think that previous knight to d5 line was fairly unclear. If just c takes on d5, bishop takes on e2, rook back to e1. I guess black would probably pick up the knight on f3, but none of that happened. Yeah, slightly faster time controls at the Bennington Winter Open. This is my personal doing. I think the future of chess are faster games. Young people like that. Old people don't. When spending some time here, thinking about how to get some rooks activated. This isn't a very forcing position. I feel like there's a lot of different ways he could take this. I was just looking at that. That's a good question from Nirvana. If he continues with what he's been focusing on, it seems like if he goes d5, I'm not sure what's going to happen there. That pawn's pinned to the undefended bishop. If we get d5, I'm going to guess that's what he's thinking about. I'm curious how white would respond. He does go with the d5 idea. I mean, the pawn can't be taken. The c pawn can't be pushed. Both sides, you have to figure out what their rooks are going to do this game. don't think white saves that pawn, but I guess the c7 pawn's under attack from the light square bishop as well. So if black takes on c4, white can take on c7. But then Glen has the choice of trying to trade some pieces too, potentially capturing with the knight or bishop. Alomgir grabs the pawn on c7. Glen plays a rook from a to c8. Bishop back to d6 with a tempo on the rook that's on f8. I missed that tempo move. That's a good little maneuver. I was curious if maybe you should let black's pawn capture on c4 first, because if black's pawn was on c4, that rook on the c file wouldn't be quite as active. And without too much of a choice here, goes rook to e8. Very even game here. Get rook from f to e1. Tough decision here for Glen. He can win that pawn on c4, but a variety of different ways to capture it. I don't know if Glen wants to take with the pawn. I feel like taking with the knight or bishop. I think he wants to keep that c3 pawn as a target for his rook. I feel like knight or bishop takes could both be playable. Pawn takes doesn't feel quite as strong. Ooh, really nice in-between move by Glen, building some pressure. Rook lift to c6 to hit the bishop. Asking what that bishop's going to do before anything else. This does give Alomgir the opportunity now to play c takes on d5, as it comes with tempo on the bishop. So there's the line of c takes on d5, rook takes on d6, and then maybe c takes on, or then d takes on e6 potentially. At first I really liked that in-between move, but it might have been a little too much. Maybe he should have just grabbed the pawn. But I still think this is a fairly tough decision for Alomgir to play c takes on d5 right now. Glen leans back a little bit. Maybe he just saw that line and doesn't like it. Looks like it seems very easy to play bishop back to g3 here, rather than c takes on d5. Well, pawn c5 is not a line. Alomgir's time under 15 minutes. Still plenty, but time is very critical in these 25-5 games, and he does find the best line of c takes on d5. Rook takes, bishop on d6 seems fairly forced now. And then Alomgir might be able to get c4 and get rid of that backwards pawn after rook takes on d6. That would be like a small victory.
bishop, so we could still kind of be attacking that like C pawn.
Ooh, the rook under attack though.
Oh,
I was looking at those lines too at bishop takes on e2, but yeah, it's the tempo on the rook.
it has to.
I think rook takes on d6 is forced. But yeah. And then is that a free bishop on a6? Takes. What did I just miss? What just got played? Takes. We get e takes on d5. So Glen leaning back a little bit. Position wasn't in his favor, but white had some things to play for, and now, or black had some things to play for with that action on the c file, and now white's got a little edge here. Bishop back to b4. Glen's happy to trade those bishops. 'Cause once again, I don't think white is able to get rid of their backward c3 pawn. I think some lines would have allowed white to play c4. Might have fixed the problem. But Glen was able to keep that rook action on the c file, and he jumps his knight onto that outpost in c4. And if we get knight takes and rook takes, that c3 pawn is going to be weak. White has to be fairly careful here with their bishop on b4, being close to being trapped. Maybe knight takes, rook takes, and like pawn a4 is the line. Rook takes, he keeps that pressure on the c file. And then I think white has to give their bishop a little breathing room. I guess there's also bishop to d6, so the bishop's not trapped anymore. But like if a5 kicks the bishop off that diagonal, there is rook takes on c3. Rook to c2. Seems like a reasonable idea. The bishop's still not trapped, and I don't think a5 is too playable here. They may get left with that backwards b pawn. Tough move to find here, but rook to e6 gives you a little bit of rook activity, and then it reopens the threat of trapping the bishop. Rook to c8 seems a little more natural and human to me.
Yeah, I think that's why he set up the c4, double the rooks on the c5.
So he does go with a5.
Yeah, that's a good move.
Bishop has to go to d6, and then maybe now he'll double on the c file. I'm a little worried.
Maybe you should have doubled on the c5 first.
Yeah, potentially, because I'm curious if white's going to get any counterplay
Do you
on
have the engine
going after b6. Engine's over here. Yeah.
What did they say?
It wanted rook e6, but it was also okay with rook c8. Now the rooks do get doubled. Rook A to C1. Rook from the 8th rank up to C6, going after that bishop. Black's got those targets on C3 and A3. White isn't really able to take advantage of any B6 action right now. Bishop back to G3 from white. I almost want Black's knight to maneuver to become a stronger piece, but I think it's doing a fairly important job of keeping an eye on B6 as well. Glen goes with B5, very principled, getting rid of the backwards pawn. Squeezing his opponent. Looks like Glen might be preparing B4 next. And in the future, it looks like E4 could be a square for the knight. You get F3 from Alomgir, maybe to remaneuver the dark square bishop, maybe for a king F2 later, but it might be for bishop back to E1. I think Glen will just power through B4 if he's going to continue the plan that he was preparing. I'm curious if, like, the knight F6 to E4 maneuver was taken away by Alomgir. Glen goes knight B6. Maybe for that knight to come to A4 and hit that C pawn one more time. Bishop back to E1, overprotecting. I don't know if I got overprotecting, it might just be protecting. I mean, Glen still has that opportunity to play B4 if he wants to break through now. I'm curious if a few moves ago if Alomgir had any lines to just give up that pawn on C3 to try to activate his rooks on the B file. You get king, knight to A4 from Glen, king to F1 from Alomgir. Glen's being very patient with this game. And now the patience is over and B4 strikes. Big decision to make here, and according to Stockfish, the game is even, but like as a human, it does feel like Black is the one exerting pressure. Yeah, we get A takes on B4. A takes on B4. This is a good game. It's living up to the hype of the final game of the Bennington Winter Open. We get Rook A2 with tempo on the knight. Black can still play B takes on C3. The Rook will discover its defense on the knight on A4. I'm curious if you're thinking about knight takes. Well, he plays neither, pushing through to B3. That pawn is pretty quick. You always forget about the push through. You think about trading or not taking, you can push it through. Rook A3 seems fairly forced. computer still says this is even, but this is going to be tense and a little difficult for white to defend. Shout out to whoever just said high quality commentary for the final round. This is the first time I've ever done this. Thank you. Big decision for Glen here. B2 hits the rook. And then a line of rook to B1. Knight takes on C3. I think a lot of stuff's getting traded. Here's what lines he's looking at right now. So I'm trying to come up with moves other than rook to B2. Or other than a pawn to B2. B2, rook B1. I feel like the C pawn might go down and the B pawn will fall too, which Alomgir would be happy with if he can trade that B pawn for his weak back in C pawn. Thanks again to Spencer and NightOwlChess for streaming the Bennington Open.
Got Tony and Danielle here on crew.
Tony and Danielle too.
Streaming every Friday.
No, I think this is the sort of stuff that'll get more people into chess. Curious if Glen has some regrets about that B4 push turn earlier, or I guess maybe more so that B3 push through versus B takes on C3. Because the B4 push seemed good. I was not expecting pawn B3. It seems a little hard for black to make progress here. Game feels quite even again. Yeah, moves are going to start flying too. This is the most time Glen spent on any move this game. I think he's a couple minutes into this think. I think he's just looking at how B2 and then rook B1. It's really hard for black to get the pawn that last square. Rook behind the passed pawn. Very principled move. I think I like that move a little bit more than pushing ahead with B2, where black can keep sort of that pressure on the queen side, keep that past B pawn, make white keep defending. Alomgir coming up to 9 minutes. Glen's at about 11.5. I think Alomgir's been working a little bit harder. It seems like Glen's been the one pressing more so this game. B1. Double attack on that B3 pawn now. Has to be pushed to keep it. It seems pretty tough for white to dislodge that pawn from B2, but it also seems pretty tough for that pawn to make it the final square it needs to B1. Bishop D2. I don't know if Glen can do anything else on the queen side right now. I think just bringing his king into the position next might be the plan. Alomgir did set up a pretty good blockade for that pawn. Time is definitely going to become a big factor as we come down the stretch here. I think Glen's looking for ways to break through on the queen side that might not be there. We'll see if cooler heads prevail, or if he tries to find something active.
Do you think Glen might try to move his B rook over one to attack his pawn?
Rook from B to C6 to put more pressure on C3 is absolutely a line I was thinking of.
He would lose it then. White would lose it probably because
I think that pawn goes down, but I think white gets the B2 pawn at the very end of it, because if that knight ever has to capture on C3, then the rook captures on B2. And he does just bring his king over. That was a good thought, though, Nirvana. I didn't really consider that as much as I should have. Cooler heads prevail. Glen plays the right idea. At some point, some moves are going to have to start coming a little bit more quickly. Kings are coming over. I'm really struggling to see how Alomgir will ever like free his pieces up though. Ooh. Glen plays rook to G6. Playing on both sides of the board. I think he did realize there wasn't too much progress to be made where he was. We get G3 from Alomgir.
A6.
Wasn't bad. They played fairly accurately. There was no way for black to break through.
If he plays rook to A6, he's got knight takes with check. Knight takes C4 check.
Rook A6. Once. I'll check out. Like, did I miss a move?
He did just rook
no.
takes C3. And I'm just getting tired of it.
It's tough for white to make progress, or tough for black to make progress. It's tough for white to free their pieces too.
It really is. He's stuck. Black is stuck.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna always got to defend that B2 pawn. Because if white has a bishop, he should be a little bit better in the endgame. What do you think, Nirvana?
I don't know, it looks tough. I'm surprised how my dad's playing. He doesn't usually play like this. He improved.
King to B3.
Yeah.
A wild king maneuver, and the king does free himself. Knight back to B6, maybe rook to A6 pinning.
Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah, this isn't good.
Oh yeah, because the king's blocking.
Mm-hmm. I think that last king lift from Glen was probably inaccurate, if not a mistake.
Yeah,
Just
I-
limiting that rook on F6, and also some like rook to A6 skewer ideas.
Trying to go to the grab the the king side is kind of.
Yeah, playing on both sides of the board was okay, but that king E6 move really
The king-
blocked in
king
his
to
rook.
B3 is awesome.
Yeah, king to B3 is a really
Knight
good
to B6
adventurous
is the only
idea.
square to go to.
Knight to B6 is
Rook
forced.
to A6, and he's got to play rook to C6. Black has to play rook to C6.
Now rook A6, black can go king F5.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then he picks up, white picks up the B2 pawn.
So instead, Alomgir finally grabs that B
Yeah,
pawn.
do that, yeah. There was no rush, maybe that pawn is his.
Yep.
Oh, and he didn't lose the.
He didn't drop the C pawn either.
Oh,
He didn't
wow.
drop the C pawn. That's amazing. It's still 0.0. That's amazing. How can it be? He's got 6 to 4. Is it stockfish? Anything else? Maybe because the blacks.
It's tough that king to E6 move was the one that gave up the advantage. Now it's technically even, but it feels like if anyone's playing for a win now, it's white. Actually,
Well,
black's king is really active, and black's
quick time controls. You know, almost anybody can win.
Yeah.
You know, you get under 5 minutes, you get pressurized. Right, Nirvana? That's what happened
Oh,
earlier.
yeah. No, my dad's actually really good with time
Who
management
is?
because he plays 10-minute games like all the time.
Yeah.
Nirvana says her dad is a blitz junkie and doesn't calculate or study deeply. He just plays fast games online.
Just like
Most people at home can relate to that. For me, 5+3 games online are essentially classical chess. H3 from Alomgir, not letting that king infiltrate to G4. We get rook to G6, pressuring the G3 pawn, bishop back to E1 defending. It is tough for Alomgir to get that C pawn moving because it feels like Glen can hold that light square of C4 pretty well against the dark square bishop. Glen goes king E4. king back to c2. King takes on e3.
Was that necessary? Was that?
It was when white pressured g3 with that pawn on h5 as well. It might have been. Like, Glen was down those pawns, but he did have... His pieces were quite a bit more active. Stockfish says the move for white is pawn to c4, even though it looks like it blunders into a fork after knight takes on c4. Oh no, it doesn't. No, it discovers the check on the king. Never mind. He does find the move of c4, gets rid of that backwards pawn. The rook check comes at the tempo on the king. Gotta assume the king's going back. Well, the king had no choices here. King, oh, there was a choice. King e4 or king takes on d4. If Alomgir finds it, bishop to f2 wins the knight, or there's some sort of how does this work? Bishop f2, king takes on c4, then rook to b3 threatens the knight, and it threatens mate with a mating idea with rook b4 check, king c3, rook b3 mate. It's a really hard line to find. He doesn't play the bishop f2 line. You'd have to go really deep to see that. C takes on d5. I see some comments about a sad bishop and a rook. White does have some sad pieces, but they've been grinding. Knight takes, I do not think can be played. Rook to d2 and bishop to f2 both seem quite difficult for black to deal with. Rook to d2 is what lands. I believe black is in some trouble here. Knight takes on d5 was maybe a little too much by Glen. King takes on d5 kind of allows the king to get back to safety. There's lots of open lines for those rooks and bishops. That knight on d5 seems pretty loose. King c4. Rook to a4 now. Rook to c3 had to land first for that tactic to work, because if you land rook to c3 and then king b5, rook a5 is protected by that bishop on e1.
Did he miss it?
He did miss the tactic. I don't It's easy for me in Nirvana to see the tactic because the computer's telling us it's there. I don't, especially under a low time control and especially like slow positional game like this, tactics are very easy to miss. I mean, there's another tactic now too though. That knight's pinned to the king and rook to b2 adds the third attacker. Alomgir misses the winning move again, but he's still okay. No, that move works.
Oh yeah. I like forgot the rules.
King d3. Everything's sort of watching each other. And if Alomgir has 2 minutes, Glen has 4 minutes. No one's notating at this point. The games are a 5-second delay too, so no one's getting any time back. I mean, this seems fairly straightforward now. King d4, bishop takes on b4, or king e4. Bishop does take on b4. Alomgir has certainly a winning position, although I don't think it's an easy position to convert by any means. There's not a lot of pawns left on the board. So with that extra bishop, if those pawns can get traded, that's still pretty difficult to convert. Glen chooses to keep pieces on the board. Rook to b6. We get rook e1, e2 check. Can Glen salvage a draw here? King back to d4. Alomgir's under 2 minutes. That bishop's got to find a square. Bishop to c3 check. King c4. Rook e4 check. I like that move, driving the king back a little bit. Ooh, or the king comes forward. So now there is a mate in 10 here. That starts with rook to d4, but mates in 10 are maybe not real. I feel like even without seeing the mate, like rook to d4 just feels like a pretty natural move.
Wait. No. Oh my god.
Oh my Oh my goodness, and a mate in 1 is blundered. Glen is our Winter Open champion. Nirvana cannot believe it. Great game, tough loss for Alomgir.
What happened?
Went from the game flipped from mate in 10 for white if they find this move to mate in 1.
It got lower. Oh, it got lower.
It was a time pressure thing too. In his defense, he's got a minute and 20 seconds. And the thing I mentioned earlier, like Glen was the one applying a pressure for a lot of the game. But Alomgir did have that at the end. Tough loss.
Everyone in the under 1600s.
Great Bennington Winter Open though. Thanks again to Night Owl Chess. My name is Trevor. I'm a local chess coach in the Bennington area. My name is Trevor Plisga. We'll be back. Andrew Palmer.
My name's Andrew.
Nice.
Any thoughts from that final game?
I got away with a swindle.
Glenn did get away with a swindle. It was a good game. There's a lot of pressure on that backward C pawn all game. And then like you had that pass B pawn, and it didn't seem like there's any way to make any progress though.
Yeah, I was really thinking that would be my ace in the hole, and I was hoping that he would weaken his light squares. I underestimated his move king to B3, which
Yes,
landed B1.
that was the big one. That when King B3 landed, that kind of changed everything.
Yeah, so I was a bit upset with my position there. I did think that I had chances just because my king was so active,
Yeah.
but turns out that probably would best play. I think
There-
my opponent should have won.
There was a mate in 10 for white on the board in one position. I believe it like was when the king was D3. I think this led to a mate in 10, which is obviously not reasonable to see, but it did exist. And then it quickly turned into a mate in 1 the other way. Alomgir, great game, great tournament. Tough finish there.
So much.